not too together on this one. It's kind of a slap together, but we're going to go ahead forward with, as you can see, what we got with U.S. history from 1888 till 1900. We're going to do a quick review on that, and we're going to start out with looking at this right here. Kirk Cameron's presents Monumental. This has been out for a while, but this is in the time frame where we're talking about with the monument here. As you can see, this is the monument he's speaking of, which was established in 1889, where we're picking up with history. This is an important part of history, I think, that we need to include. I think everybody, too, I put a post on my Facebook. If you haven't seen this movie he made, excellent documentary on history. Very, very accurate facts. And I think very, very important, especially if you're an American Christian. Very important information in this video that any true American should know about the monument that is spoken of here, that's in Massachusetts. This monument was put up in 1889. It's in representation of that of the Pilgrims, of the founding of our nation, on the Puritans, to the founding principles of Christianity. Has a lot of important information about Congress being commissioned to authorize a Bible for the United States, a Bible that was to be put into all the courthouses and schools of the nation. Like I said, just very important information. I think everybody should want to go. I've been putting this out to people who I know as personal friends, informing them, because in doing the research, getting ready for this next video on history, I came across and I remembered him making this movie back a while. An excellent movie. Again, I recommend it to everybody. I'll include that link right here to this. It's Kirk Cameron Presents Monumental. Excellent biography on history. I recommend it to everyone, and this is where we're starting off with, is about the monument here. This is a monument that was put up to give us an idea of the structure of what our true founding principles are as the United States of America, and what we intended for our nation within how to establish and maintain freedom, liberty, and justice for all, with faith in true integrity with God. So this monument represents that. It was a monument erected by our founders to give us a direction on how to maintain and secure our nation going forward for our posterity, and maintain it as we are charged to do, not only in our Declaration of Independence, but our Constitution, to maintain and secure this nation as it was founded for that of our American posterity. If we ever should get lost, this monument presents a history and a story and a path to how to find our way back. Very important. I think everybody should watch it. I really found it to be a very good documentary on history. So I'm just recommending that out. Now we go from there to another thing that happened in this era here, where we're up in 1890s, 1888, 1890s, going into 1900s. We had the first graduating class from the Spelman College, which was a black women's college that was established with white Republicans. Most people don't know, back in this time, though, the Democrats, due to segregation laws and Jim Crow laws, had kept the South segregated. The Democrats were very racist. They still are to this day. They're the same Democrats, though they keep trying to hide. And eventually, too, at the end of this video, we're going to touch on something to show how the Democrats have been manipulating history and hiding who they really are, and playing this game of just deviant game of lies, write out lies, and where they're doing exactly what they accuse others of doing, which by these examples in history, as we move over this next decade going into the 1900s, we're going to expose their methods and how they do this. Near the end of this, I have something very, very realistic to deal with on it. But first, we're going to cover the history real quick. This was one of the, this is a trivial thing, but an important thing I felt is about with the Spelman College was important, because as you can see here is something that we see with Candace Owens, she speaks about, and as well Jesse, what's his name? He's a guy who does a radio show. I like him. I watch his shows. I can't believe I just had a brain fart where I can't remember his last name. But he's a guy, Jesse, he does a lot. He speaks on these things a lot, too, about how, today society sees things as this racial issue between black and white. But in truth, the racial issue between black and white, being on a racial premise, didn't really develop to be that until what we're coming into, the 1900s, 1915 era, with Woodrow Wilson. Prior to that, it was a humanity issue, and with an elitist status of those who were the elitist scumbag racist of mostly in this country would have been the Democrats, and but as far as the alliance between Republicans, who are the anti-slavery, who won the Civil War, fought the Democrats in the Civil War, and beat them, as we know from previous history. Up to this point, we covered those things. And now you still had those. See, the Democrats never gave up the Civil War. They kind of went underground with their methods and their practices, and they kept, they became what they still are to this day, the enemies within in their secret societies of what they have, and how they're still progressing to fight that Civil War in their attempt to still kind of destroy America, their effort is to destroy the constitutional free republic of the United States of America. That's always been their goal, and it's scary today that they're very much near the line of being able to do it, but it's not the first time they've come to that. And as we review this next decade, you're going to realize history repeats itself. And again, we're repeating ourselves. We'll see this history repeat itself from this decade going forward again. We see it again in 1929, and we're seeing it right now again, happening again. So, and it's all caused by the Democratic Party, the known and declared enemies within, who have been the enemies within since this nation was founded. But let's go forward now and take a look here. We have so people understand too, this happened in 1892. It was the first actual terrorist bombing of a building. This is where a very wealthy man, prominent, was the crazy man. Awful act here, they call it. It was an event what happened was somebody tried to extort some very wealthy man in New York City, and the guy was the first suicide bomber, I guess you could say, in our history in this country. He blew himself up and killed several people in the building at the time and did destruction on the building, demanding $1.2 million from this wealthy man. This was an event that's in history that this is to record the first suicide bomber in American history. Would have been in 1892 with the bomb in the big bag. Okay. Another important thing that happened in 1892 was, I believe this was 1892, right? Was let's see, yeah, 1892 was where we started the Pledge of Allegiance to our American flag, and these things are all important when you consider that these are things that the reason why these things came about in American history are important. And these all relate back to what we were just talking about here with the National Monument of the Forefathers. This monument here is as well. Congress was slow to the Pledge of Allegiance because, these were things that were all to be established to maintain our posterity on the principles and values of Americanism. We, as the Republic of the United States of America, the Constitutional Republic of the United States of America, and those of true Republicans, were trying to establish Americanism. And the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag was a part of establishing that Americanism with that of our posterity, teaching our American youth to honor and respect the flag. It would be the thing to where, eventually, like you start this thing in first grade, their Pledge of Allegiance, as the history is taught to these kids, supposedly is supposed to be this way in education. What you'll see in this monument, we have this monument covers faith and education. You watch the movie, you'll get a gist of it. But education is a very important part of it, and God is a very important part of it. Faith is very important in it, and all these things that lead into history to what we have that established in this country. As we try to do it, the Democrats, they develop oppositions to it. The Pledge of Allegiance was the thing to establish pride and dignity in our country, our founding principles of Americanism. It was something that was shared not only, it was shared with Republicans, which most people aren't aware. During this time, Republicans really didn't have a separation by race of black or white. Republicans, all black Americans at the time of 17, where we're talking 1892 or 1882 or 1880s and 90s, all black Americans were Republicans then, because they understood that Republicans stood for the Republican founding principles of the United States of America, which was freedom and equality for all, right? All men are created equal. That was the Republican foundation. So at this time, though, but just so you understand, this was also in the South had these segregated schools, but the Black Americans as well were proud to say the Pledge of Allegiance in their schools as well as the white Republicans were. The only ones who are opposed to these kind of things, which they still are today, is the Democrats. And the reason why is because they never had an alliance to the United States of America to begin with, which, that's my whole theme on this is not so much trivia, but we do have some trivia that's important that relates to it to explain the inhumanity of the division in our country that has always been present between that of the Democrats and the Republicans. When I say Republicans, I don't speak of the lazy, no good, worthless Republicans we have in government today. I speak of that of the Republicans on the true founding principles of America as declared in our Declaration of Independence and established as a foundational of the law of the nation in our Constitution. Those Republican values of which, as we go forward and we get to the end of this, we're going to get to that. We have here, too, and that happened in 1892, we had Ellison Island started to receive immigrants. By this point, too, the Statue of Liberty wasn't yet up. But we see that Ellis Island is taking the immigrants for the first time into that. Ellis Island becomes the first immigration building constructed of Georgia pine, opened in January 1st, 1892. These are just some trivial things that we can look at. Black Americans in Congress. I have this here because we face a hard year in 1892 as we move forward, you're going to see. But we also have in this area here, which I'll include this link, you'll realize we had a large move with white Republicans supporting black Republicans entering and blacks coming into Congress. This really angered the Democrats. And the Democrats by this point in 1892 had a lot of different methods of secret societies to terrorize that of the now free black Americans and as well the white Republican Americans. Boy, was it an onslaught terrorism. Like today, people think terrorism is something new. The only thing new about terrorism today is that the Democrats' allies of the Islamic Muslims are actually making their way into our country by using the Democratic platform to enter our country and our politics to be able to terrorize us here on our own home ground. Other than that, we've always had the terrorist acts of the Democrats terrorizing the American people, the true republic of the Republicans of the United States of America. The Democrats have always been a terrorist organization. They've never been that of American society, of that of Americanism, never. And you'll see that as we progress forward, as history has shown up until this point, it's a fact. The reason why things get so bad is because right here, we recognized in the last one here about with Grover Cleveland. Grover Cleveland would be the first Democrat elected since the time of the Civil War. And then we would get Benjamin Harrison. And then again, we would get in 1892, Grover Cleveland. Somewhat, when you look back at history, you wonder why, being that we know, the Democrats from the Civil War forward, even prior to the Civil War, were known as the British Loyalists, the Tories, and they've always been these terrorist organization of the enemies within, and they still are. Why would we elect Grover Cleveland? Why would the American people even? Well, I'll tell you, it wasn't something that was a willfully thing done. As we know from even the time of the Civil War, as we mentioned in the last previous videos, the first corruptions to elections start with the Democrats. In the Civil War, the second election of Abraham Lincoln, they did the same thing as what they did in the current recent election with mail-in ballots. They corrupted the election, but Lincoln caught them, and things were resolved on that. It didn't go the way it went with Donald Trump, and where they actually stole the election. But this again, too, like I say, they had many methods, which we can see. We had the origins of the Jim Crow voting. The Jim Crow laws were a segregational thing that the Democrats kept trying to do in a way to separate that of white and black Republicans. There was a unification between white and black Republicans that existed all the way from the time of the founding of this nation back in 1777 among the free state colonies. In those areas there was never a black and white issue. From 1777 forward, the black and white free Americans coexisted in the original 13 colony areas of the free states, because the first state to abolish slavery was Vermont in 1777. Most people think it took all the way to 1861, the Civil War, but that's not true. The Constitutional Declaration of Independence was established in 1777. The principles that stand to that started in 1777, like I said, with the state of Vermont abolishing slavery at that time, and then progressively moving forward by 1861, when the Civil War broke out, where the Democrats formed the Confederate slave states and attacked the constitutional free United States and tried to overthrow us. At that point, there was 19 free states under the Constitutional Republic of the United States of America and 15 slave states under the Democratic Party's Confederate slave states. So understand that there was, and then all the other territories out by Wisconsin, all the way out to the state of Washington and California, these were all free territories too in the nation. It was only the areas that were under the control of the Tory Democrats that slavery was pretty still prevalent, and that's where the majority of all slaves were with the Tory Democrats, the Democratic Party. So, and then too, after the Civil War, they had enacted the Jim Crow laws in an attempt to keep the now free black Americans oppressed, and as well as a method of trying to keep white and black divided so that they could always keep that division. And that was their goal. We see here too, we had spoken to this before, that we had the Knights of Labor unions. This started too in 1869 after the Civil War. The Knights of Labor was another thing. This is why Republicans are against unions. The unions, labor unions of what we know, are a way of controlling employment and industrial growth and entrepreneurship. It's a way that a union is being used by Democrats, though it leaves the ignorance of public to think, like the working class think that the union is to their benefit, and those who are in the union think they're getting some kind of benefit, which they don't realize. In all truth and honesty, if you analyze the union, you analyze the industrial effects of the union, and you say to yourself, okay, let's just use an example. Say in Georgia you have an electrician. That electrician, as a union electrician, makes $27.50 an hour. Now, and he thinks he's making that because he's a union electrician. But what he doesn't realize is that if he wasn't a union electrician, which if you look at like entrepreneur, independent contractor electricians in Georgia, they're making $35 an hour. Okay, and the union doesn't like them. The union actually tries to oppress them from working on union jobs, and they want the unions because they don't even want their own union workers to realize that independent electricians make a lot more money than unions, because then it would encourage them to want to not be union, right? It would encourage them to want to be independent. And this is the thing, though. You see, those who are ignorant get trapped up with the union thinking they're getting benefits. Some of them forget the history of what is going to go forward. We'll get on that when we get up to Henry Ford with the production lines and things like that, and then the automobile industry union by the Democrats when they start that, and how the corruption gets exposed, but nobody pays attention to it, about how the unions go in and actually are working for themselves, not the employees. Like, just to give you an example, I'm just going to give you an example. We're going to jump ahead in time. There's a point where Henry Ford, he was willing to pay more to his employees, and the unions were working at it, and they came in, and Henry Ford, just hypothetical, I don't remember off the top of my head the exact amounts, but let's just say Henry Ford, and I believe it was, he was willing to give them $1.25 an hour. And they were making, I think, like 68 cents an hour. Okay, and this was a big raise. This would have been a big increase. But the union had negotiated with him to give them 80 cents an hour, and they keep 20, so raise it up to like $1, and they get 20 cents an hour for everyone who works. So kind of like they would get a percentage, like a bonus, a commission, for every union member who works. They get 20 cents an hour of their labor. Think about that reality. You want to talk about disgraceful, right? And this was a racketeering thing that was going on, still goes on to this day. Most of the labor unions are run by nothing but worthless, just like our Congress right now, of the Republicans, for the majority, and nothing but a bunch of lazy, worthless, ass-sitting attorneys who are failures that can't make it in the real world with a firm or their own practice, so they take up an ass-sitter elected position on high-paid welfare in the government, and they sit on their ass and do absolutely nothing. That's what we got from the majority of Republicans right now in the Republican establishment, a bunch of ass-sitter, lip service, do-nothing friggin' Republicans. It's disgraceful. But anyway, so that's what the Knights Labor Union was about. Also, the Knights Labor Union was about the thing of which we spoke a little bit about before, because as I said, it was started in 1869, okay, and then during that time forward, we understand what the Democrats were utilizing this union for. It became a terrorist-like organization. The Ku Klux Klan members of this, out of their hooded things, would be the ones who would be running the unions. They would go in and they would push on the Industrial Revolution that was going on. The unions would go in and they would offer all these promises to the employees, this, that, and everything, get them to side with them and threaten to strike. And of course, the business owner then would come to the table for negotiations. What is it you want to do? And then they would negotiate for power positions. Back then, it wasn't really so much. They would look for little perks to give, but their whole goal really wasn't giving the employees anything. Their goal was trying to gain political control of the industries. And what they wanted to do was have their Ku Klux Klan hire members appointed as foremen within these developing large factory jobs and whatever in the northern states like New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and even like Georgia and Chicago, where these factories were developing and the Industrial Revolution taking place. And they wanted the position, and when they would get these positions, because up until this point where we get into the 1880s, 1890s, many of the now free black Americans had been filling a lot of those positions because they were highly sought after by the Republicans, were mostly the Industrial Revolution boomers. They were the guys who were, engineering these big factories and coming up with the innovation that was leading the way for the Industrial Revolution. And they were seeking out to hire that of the now free black Americans because they had really strong work ethics. They were good working, hard-class people that really wanted to impress the nation and the people with good ethics and morals and values, and they were highly sought after. The Democrats complained that the black Americans were stealing their jobs for decades after the Civil War. And it was just really the truth of it was that, and then the truth as we get into this, you're going to realize the Democrats were just lazy, worthless people, and they were self-proclaimed elitist scumbags that didn't want to work, didn't want to do anything, and they were not good for any economy. They were not good for it. Nobody wanted to hire them because who wants to hire a lazy ass sitter, right? You know what I'm saying? It's just a fact. So, as we move forward, you're going to see, though, by the efforts that they did, like with the Knights Labor Union or Ku Klux Klan and their red shirts, they had this organization called the Red Shirts. The Red Shirts were developed, of which I think as we go forward, we're going to... Right, the Red Shirt movement in 1898. This goes up to 1918, but they started way before that. This is a good book to read on something that happened in 1898 through the 1900s with the move on the Red Shirts. The Red Shirts were another division of a secret society of the Ku Klux Klan of the Democratic Party. That was a movement that was moved to, one, suppress the black Americans at the voting booths, and then also aid and assist that of the unions in being able to suppress them from seeking employment where they were trying to, what you could call, white employ the industrial area, like in Chicago, Pennsylvania, Newark, New Jersey. The Democrats had started to pretty much spread out. What you're going to see as we move forward, I think I have a map that shows with the union. I think it might be somewhere forward. Yeah, here it is right here. The Knights Labor Union. As you can see, this is a map of the progression in time that goes forward up to 1899 to how much of the industrial sector that the Knights Labor Union of the Democratic Party's Ku Klux Klan Knights Labor Union had taken over and moved into, and this is how they were able to control elections. You see, not only were I'm trying to explain how we wound up getting Grover Cleveland for a second term. This is all because of the Red Shirts. The Red Shirts at this time, and then as well the Knights Labor Union. You see, once they controlled the massive quantity, like I say, if you look at that map, one more time if I can find it. Here it is. You look at that map and realize they had gained control, even by this point here with Grover Cleveland, by the second term of 1892. They had gained a massive amount of control of the Chicago textile industrial boom that was taking place. They had gained it in Pennsylvania, South Carolina, Georgia industrial areas that were developing, and they had already taken pretty good control of the farming districts, of which they have already by this point, I'm just going off memory here, I don't have anything up on this, but it's coming to mind when I remember. There was an issue going on with foreign bonds that were being issued on farming, on the commodities exchange. And the Democrats, through their unions and with the farming unions, they had already dominated the southern farming district and had disenfranchised the black Americans out of that of the farming industry, and already started to cause a recession among the farming industry so bad that it started, this was the initiation of the Depression that led into, most people only remember the Great Depression of 1929 and do not realize that during this period here, we're talking about 1892 forward, or 1888 going 1888, 1892 forward to the 1900s, we were in a Great Depression as well. And it was due to the Democrats constant interference and obstruction of that of the progress of the Constitutional Republic of the United States of America in their effort to keep the nation divided and oppress the black Americans and to seize control themselves within political positions of power through the use of democratic terrorism. And that's pretty much what they are, and they've always been, as a terrorist organization. The enemies within the United States of America. That's what they've always been. They still are to this day. They're still using the very same tactics. When you look at the history of just our short 244-year history in America, you become aware that these ignorant, no-good, self-proclaimed elitist scumbag Democrats are repetitive in exactly what they do time and time again. And it comes from an ancient method. And it's a practice that's incorporated within generations, which are 25-year periods, out to centuries, which are 100-year periods. Usually they initiate their century moves about 90 years out, and they like we see right now, the move that we're affecting right now starts in the 1930s. So we're in the year 2020, so you can figure out, 1930, 2020, we're 90-year mark. You kind of get the gist of it, why we're where we're at, and understand when you look at like here, 1861 and going into the 1900s, when we get into 1950 and then all the way to 1960s, we had the 1960 Civil Rights Movement, 90 years. You see what I'm saying? Kind of 90, 100 years. You get that, it's repetitive. But we're going to see how it first starts out here, because this is well, understand that Democrats learn this because they're part of the foreign totalitarian alliances of the world that are the enemies of the United States of America. They've always been. And the Democrats have always been the enemies within. And as we can see today, it has become to a clear point where they have opened up their platform of who they are under the goose and the mask of their lies and deception and twisted history, and masking and hiding who they are by confounding the posterity with just right out blatant lies and disgraceful distortions of our American history and who we are as the American people. They claim themselves to be Americanism, and they claim, it's just amazing. But by the end of this, you're going to realize just how disgracefully evil the Democrats are, because we have proof from history that there's so much history now that when you look at these facts, you realize these people are just evil, disgusting, no good, elitist scumbags who are the enemies within that. The only way America is ever going to succeed in its true intent of what it wanted to establish as the true constitutional republic of these United States is we have to get rid of the Democratic Party. And because the truth of the fact is, these people are the only obstructing thing in our way is the Democratic Party. And they're doing the same things they've been doing throughout history, still this very day, as we're going to see as we go forward. But as we say, we have the Knights Labor Union. The way that Grover Cleveland would get elected again in his second term would be through the red shirts. The red shirts, what they would do is, first off, they would have the Knights Labor Union dominate the industrial factory positions, right? So now everybody's working for the union. The union pretty much would tell everybody you either vote Democrat or you may not have a job after the election. Meaning if they found out you voted Republican, you were going to get fired. And even worse, you could have the Klan show up at your house and burn your house down. Even worse, you could get hung, lynched. No joke. Most people don't realize that, right here, we're going to look in here. I'm just going to show you with Grover Cleveland, which we went over this in the last video a little bit. 1884 was the first year a Democrat was elected after the Civil War. Now, we hear about lynching and hangings. Everybody thinks about today, like you have the blacks, the ignorant, stupid black people today. They want reparations, this, that, and everything. They think, oh, poor woe's me. Like they're the only ones that ever been slaves. That's just ridiculous. And they're the only ones who suffered in this country under that of the atrocity of the inhumanity of the Democrats and their freaking supremacy. They're not the only ones, because like we see here in the year 1884, we're going to go here to lynching. And look at 1884. I don't know if you can see that. Let me zoom in on it. See if we can see this here. I'll get on it. We'll zoom in so you can see this if I can get it to zoom. And I'm trying. Just give me a minute. I'm trying here. Okay, let's try here. See that. There we go. Okay, so now you can see 1884. This right here is lynching by year and race. See? You have whites and you have blacks. 1884, the year that Grover Cleveland was first elected after the Civil War, the first time a Democrat being elected, 160 whites were lynched and only 51 blacks. And you want to know who those whites were? Those whites were Republicans who were fighting for equality among Republicans. It wasn't a white and black issue. It was an Americanism. We were unified as one people of black and white, fighting for one nation of one people of all equal. You see, the republic, that's the republic. One people of one nation of all equal. And because the white Republicans were so strong in their movement, we clashed with the Democrats and their Ku Klux Klan and their Red Jackets and the rest of their secret society of the Knights Labor Union, what have you. And these people were literally killing white Republicans for helping black Republicans. And the reason why is because, like I say, and then too, as we progress forward, you're going to understand when we get into the 1900s what that effort was doing. The black communities were prospering greatly in spite of the Jim Crow laws and the separate but equal laws and the segregation that the Democrats were doing. The unification between white and black Republicans was not on a basis of race or color. It was a unification of American as one people of all equal. And in business and industrial boom and moving forward in education and prospering in this country, we were sticking to the principles of the Constitution. And the black communities were prospering even in spite of all the evil of the Democrat segregation and division that they were causing and the terrorist acts that they were doing. But, like I say, in 1884, the first election of a Democrat after the Civil War was the worst year for white Republicans. 160 white Republicans got hung because they were aiding and assisting that of trying to help the black Republicans get ahead and forward and take their share in the great American dream of the prosperity that was taking place during the industrial boom. So now, as we move forward, we see this guy gets elected again in 1892. 1892, not so much the thing, it reversed. Here in 1892, the reversal was because the Red Jackets realized they weren't going to stop. You know, when we look at 1884, that didn't discourage. No, neither did the Civil War, right? 360,000 white Republicans died in the Civil War for equality and to set this nation on the foundation of that all men are created equal. And in 1884, the onslaught of that, of 160 white Republicans being lynched by the Ku Klux Klan and Red Jackets of the Democratic Party, didn't stop either. The progression went forward. Now, by this time here with the second term of Grover Cleveland, they understood they needed one thing. They needed blacks to stop voting. And they needed blacks to accept the fate of the white supremacy of the Democratic Party. And so what they did was they reversed it. Instead of hanging the white Republicans, of which this time too, mind you, the white Republicans were unified and prepared and armed and ready should it happen again when they heard that Grover Cleveland was coming back in, because they knew. Okay, and the redcoats and the Democrats are freaking cowards. They're really cowards. When they realize that the people are prepared to fight them, they're cowards. Now, the black communities, not so much. And then you can see the reversal that happened here. This was going toward the area. Why there was 161 lynchings of blacks was by the Redcoats and the Ku Klux Klan of the Democratic Party in an attempt to get them to be disenfranchised and stop voting. Okay, and they even worked with them toward getting them, and it's disgraceful when you look at the truth in history and realize that they were, the Ku Klux Klan within the Knights Labor Union were taking the higher foreman positions within these factories. They had disenfranchised the majority of blacks out of it, but that was okay. Many black communities were prospering and growing and establishing their own industrial boom as well and enjoying the benefits of prosperity. You couldn't stop prosperity when you're free. So they were able to still take in those who were being disenfranchised within the black communities and provide, and the black communities were thriving. They were thriving. So it was no big deal as far as that goes, and many of the black Republicans were working with them to help them out in that progression as well. So things were going along good, which you're going to see as we go forward. But anyway, now where we're at here is the Redcoats. This is what I'm talking about. So Grover Cleveland got elected by disenfranchising the blacks from elections. They became afraid. All those hangings, lynching that were taking place was to scare the black Americans from voting, or to force the Americans too. Now that's the other thing. In order, now most of the blacks that were disenfranchised in the industrial boom by the Knights Labor Union, and mind me if I'm rambling a little, it all comes off memory. I'm trying to remember how I want to go about this, and I don't have a script to go by, so I'm just going off memory here. And I know what it is I'm trying to say. They had, when they hired, when the foremen of the Ku Klux Klan would get the higher positions as the foremen in these factories, they would fire off any of the higher paid blacks. And then now what they would do in 1892 is they would offer to hire them back, but at lower paying jobs. And what they would do, and this is what took place up until 1998, was that the Klan members of the higher foreman positions, and even that of the working class white now of the Klan, because this is how they grew their Klan base too. If you join the Klan, you could pretty much work in a factory kind of like hands behind your head and watch the blacks work. You know, it was kind of like a paid slave labor kind of thing that they were organizing, the Democrats, during this area here. And it started to affect the nation greatly, because they had already caused recession, like I said, with foreign bonds collapsing on the commodities exchange over their actions, that they did the same thing like this with the farming districts in the southern farming districts. It was just disgraceful. But now it was starting to affect the industrial boom. And we had, so we're going to see here the red shirts. We went through this, you understand. If you don't know who the red shirts were, they were a branch as well. And the red shirts come back too, when you look into the ideology, the forming of it, it goes back to exactly who the Democrats were, the Confederate slave states, with their loyalty as the British loyalists. The red shirts represented that of the red coats, if you know what I'm saying, of the British. It was another signaling to Great Britain that they were still in alliance with them, and that they were still in pursuit of that, to destroy the United States of America and to establish that of a democratic democracy, a pure democracy, of which in the last videos, of which when we went over the Federalist Papers, Federalist Paper number 10, we understood how James Madison warned about a pure democracy and how that was not what America wanted. But this is the pursuit of the Democrats, and it's clear this is what they want today, a democratic democracy. But now as we move forward here, and I have links for this so you can look. This goes up to 1876. This is so you can get an idea of when the Redcoats actually started. They were like another organization outside of that of the Ku Klux Klan. But like here I have up about the Long Depression. Now this Long Depression here starts in 1873, which is what the reason why I had that link to right here with the 1876. You can see that the Depression happens with the Democrats imposing themselves not only now on the farming textile districts of the southern areas and the farming districts, but as well now on the industrial boom of the northern districts. With them moving now in using terrorist tactics of, lynching white Republican business owners, threatening to kill them, blowing them up, burning their homes down, terrorizing their children, their wives, what have you. Same as they've always done, no different, They're, like I say, the Democratic Party is a terrorist organization, and that's what they've always been. And then, like I say here, the lynching, the facts all prove it, and the history proves it. There's facts to it. And then, like I say here, when you realize, I was hoping this thing used to work. It's not working right now, where I could click on the years over here to the right, and you could actually see how they progressed and how it was. Because this right here is reflecting all right now, all the way up to 1899. And this, so you can understand, look at this is the areas in 1899 that the Democratic Party's Knights of the Labor Union, in coalition with that of their red shirts and the Ku Klux Klan, this is the areas they were dominating. And these were the industrial revolutionary booming areas. And this is what led to the what we see here, the Long Depression. Because Democrats are lazy. They're self-proclaimed elitist scumbag, lazy people who just feel entitled and that they should be able to just sit back and not have to do nothing. Those kind of people dominating this large of an area of non-working, ass-sitting, lazy, worthless people, well, that's why we went into depression. Without production, you don't have money made. Without money made, you have a depression. So this is where it starts to fall apart. This depression led all the way up to 1893. I'll include links to this if maybe people weren't aware about this Great Depression. I talk to people, they're not aware about this. People only know the Great Depression from 1929. I got news for you, the third Great Depression we've had. And all Great Depressions in the United States of America, and even prior to us being the United States of America when we were just the colonies, all were stemmed off and caused since 1777. Since 1777 up till 1828 was caused by the Tories, who became the Democrats in 1828, and then from 1828 forward, the next two major depressions, of which now we're about to enter the third major depression, because we're hitting up now 244 years into the makings of the United States of America, and the Democrats are on their tear down again for the third depression they're going to cause in this country. It's just disgraceful that no one's caught on to history. We've been told time and time, as a kid, me growing up, that's all I ever heard was know your history, know your history. History's important, you don't know it, you'll repeat it. I took the stuff literal, that's why I know so much about history. I want to know my place as an American, what my responsibility is as an American, and what my true position as an American is. And I understood young in life, after in-depth study of history that I was a Republican, because we are a republic, and that's what we were founded as. Again, repetitive, I know, and I say this in every video so people are aware. Article 4, Section 4 of the United States Constitution only authorizes that of a Republican form of government in this country. Now, again, so you understand, George Washington did not favor political parties. He felt that us being a republic was enough, and being that our government was never really intended to be an authoritarian government, which when you look at George Washington, you realize how painstakingly hard he tried to example what the president should be in a humble nature of that of any American man. He didn't want to be a king. He didn't want no special treatment. I mean, even when they built the presidential mansion, he wouldn't live in it. He refused to go live in it because he said, no, it's too much like kingly. He didn't want to do it. And he tried to set these examples. And he's also the president who set the two-term example, that you do 2 terms, you do your duty to your nation, and you step aside. You go back to doing what you were doing. Some people, I remember it was said by... King George III had asked, what was George Washington going to do after the war, now that they had victory? And it was inquired through state ambassadors, like, what was Washington's plans? And they were told that Washington said he's going back to Mount Vernon, he's going back to farming. And there was a reply that was documented that the king had said, oh my God, if he does this, he'll be noticed the greatest man in history, because what man gives up, when people are willing to make you a king, gives up a kingship to go back to being a farmer? But see, Washington did this in his genius of setting examples that Americans should follow and understand. You get in this world what you give. You're blessed by God in exchange for what your true faith and allegiance is to that of the truth and the moral values of integrity. And even if you have not a lot of material things, you can be rich in love and happiness beyond that of even ever wanting to desire material things by the blessings of God. I know those things to a certain level with the love I know of my grandkids and my children. These things, there's no wealth in the world of material value that could replace knowing my son loves me. You know what I'm saying? That's rich. That's rich to me. That's like I'm richer than Donald Trump with that. And Donald Trump has that because his children do love him. And that's a great wealth beyond, I'm sure. But he's a greedy man. He likes money. And I don't think he really weighs. I hope he doesn't weigh the value of money over that of his true love of family. But who am I to judge? But anyway, we're back to this here in history. So when we get here to the Great Depression hitting into 1893, and we're moving forward now. We have the Panic of 1893 that talks about. I'll include stories of this. Like I say, I can't cover everything in detail. I'm just trying to give people in this the gist of what's politically going on and what is the cause of the problems. This Great Depression that we see coming into the 1890s, going into the 1900s, is caused by that of the constant interference by the Ku Klux Klan of the Democratic Party, the red shirts of the Democratic Party, and the Knights of the Labor Unions of the Democratic Party's Ku Klux Klan labor unions. These guys dominating that of the industrial boom and the growth and prosperity taking place in the nation as a lazy, self-entitled, elitist people, self-proclaimed elitists that don't do nothing, as they move into positions with their terrorist tactics of lynching people, burning people out, beating people up, what have you. Those big business owners eventually, when you have a factory full of Democrats, you have a failing factory. Because they don't work. They're lazy, self-proclaimed elitist scumbags. They don't want to work. And that's pretty much what makes up today's union workers. Not all. You have many union workers who are ethical Americans that just, it's just the way it goes. Like you see like Coors and, the auto industry. The things that keep them going is the true working class, not the Democrats. The Democrats within the unions, believe me, are the ass-sitters. They're the worthless deadweight that are the cause of all the hardship that we see within all the industrials across this nation. Just disgraceful, lazy, worthless people, in my opinion. But as we go forward here, the labor and the industrial, I'll include some articles here just so people can understand. Most of the articles we're flashing through here, if you read them in depth, you're going to get an understanding and realize, because they all mention how this is related to that of Democratic and the Ku Klux Klan and the red shirts. These articles all identify things, and some of these things, like I say, when we go back into things in history, there's evidence of fact that exists in old clippings and newspapers and what have you. And pretty much, so that's where we're at right now. We realize we're coming out of the Panic of 1893. We're heading into the 1900s. Okay, and pretty much up until this point, understand America is the greatest nation in the world. America, with George Washington, he was the president who established a government is like the world had never seen before. A government of the people, for the people, by the people, with no king, no monarchies, no supreme leaders, no superior rulers, no demigods. A government established, non-authoritarian, that's there to serve the people. We're today, in the year 2021, we are so far off track from what this country intended. And we're so far off track by a long-standing enemy that has been in this nation since 1777 when we declared our independence. And that was the British Tory loyalists who became the Democrats. And since 1828, since they formed their Democratic Party, they have been the political enemies within and out of the aiding and assisting of the enemies outside in this world who have been trying to destroy this country since we founded it. But it is the greatest nation in the world. At this point here, there's other things I want to touch on real quick in relation to some trivial, I guess you could say, maybe some trivia to things that took place. We'll go over. Trying to think, see, some of the great things that happened in this period that, would have been... Oh, there's a lot of things. I mean, I know I could think of, but like trivia, I'm trying to think of things because I keep getting people say they want the trivia, they want to know about the things, that took place. We have Thomas Edison during this time, right? Yeah, it was Thomas Edison. 1893. He had made the first, you remember, kid, you had the little clicky things with the things, or you had the flicking of paper. You could make a movie. He had made the first movie where you could look through a lens and you could see a motion, like a first kind of depiction of a motion picture. That was in 1893. And then you had, let's see, there was some of the other things that took place. There was some great things that did happen. I know it was 1896 we had the first Olympics, I believe it was, if I'm not mistaken. It was the first Olympics games we had. That was in 1895 or 96. Then we had one of the things in reference to I should have had up here was about what was it? Presley? No, not Presley. Ferguson, Presley versus Ferguson, Presley. I'm not sure of the name. It was a case that took place with segregation at the time, where it shows the Democrats, how the Democrats really didn't, it just represents the show coming into the 1900s, how the Democrats were still opposed that blacks having any kind of rights or freedom in this country. That was Paisley or Presley or something versus Ferguson. You can look it up. I don't have anything up for it right now, but I'm just trying to give you some trivia off of that point there. But now we're going to go into the close of it, coming up into the 1900s. I have here something that it's called the Constitution of the United States. I couldn't believe I found this actually online. This is amazing. It's the Constitution of the United States of America. This is coming into the 1900s. This is about Australia. America gaining one of its first American valued principal allies in the world, Australia. And this is important in the 1900s. This is where we're going to leave off on the history point. Now we're going to go into some facts or some things we have to consider of some ugliness I've unearthed that I'm unhappy about. And then also it relates to that of things we have to consider today about the enemies within and what direction our nation is heading. But first we're going to talk about this. This right here I want to show you. I have an original copy from 1941. I don't know if you can see that. I've had this book for so many years. It was given, this is an original copy from 1941. If you look on the inside, it has the signed page by some very important people of history. Give you an example: Herbert Hoover, Alfred Smith, Mrs. Harry Taft. Okay, just give you an idea. And the thing I remember reading in this book was about in the 1900s, about where it talks about the Constitution and how, to me, it was important that this book I felt was important because it talks about our first alliance with a foreign world power. Now, Australia in 1900, of which I probably can find it in here. I'll show you right where it says it. It's not too far down into the preface here. 1788. Just give me one moment, people. 1793. Here it is, right here. The Commonwealth of Australia adapted the Constitution 1900 following orders more closely even than that of Canada in 1867. Canada, you can't really trust Canada. Canada kind of, no joke, is kind of more of that of the Tory, and they're like a Benedict Arnold kind of thing, like the Democrats are. They play like they're Americans, but they're really the enemies within. You can't trust them, and they still follow the monarchy. But with the Commonwealth of Australia adapted the Constitution, Australia was the closest of anybody to adapt our Constitution. They literally pretty much took the United States Constitution, took the United States of America off the top and put Australia. They had everything verbatim to ours, and they became a world alliance, of which as we move forward now into the 1900s, this is important to understand because we also move into World War I, and where we see how that alliance works out for us in helping and aiding and assisting, even though America never really actually declared war on anyone in World War I, we just aided and assisted our allies. We understand how that alliance played an important role. And then as we progress forward, you're going to understand how the world recognized that the Americanism was starting to spread and how quickly the enemies of the Democrats within aided and assisted the world's total totalitarian regimes in putting the brakes on that alliance and that ability for Americanism to spread, which makes very clear and unquestionable how sincere the Democrats are in ensuring that Americanism does not spread in this world, and that it makes very clear how strongly their goal is. As we get into the 1900s, it's going to become very, very clear how strong the Democrats want to destroy this nation and how they are still, in the start of the 1900s and even up to this very modern day, the enemies within. But we're going to leave off with history right now on that point there. We're entering into the 1900s. We're going to pick up in the 1900s on the next video. And we're going to close out on this going into looking into some other history, which I'm going to see real quick. I'm going to go out of here and fade into just me. I like that the fact that some history books I've read in the past are now, they have what's called audible books, right? So I can put in my earbuds at the gym while I'm working out, and I have my little MP3 player that actually does audiobooks real good, so I can listen to the audiobooks. Now, I was enjoying an audiobook on George Washington, which I have here, and you're going to be able to hear this. I'm going to just play a part of this book because this is disturbing, because in the actual book, this is not what it says. And listening to the audiobook, when I heard this, I was like, what the hell just happened? But then it reminds me of how the Democrats have been trying to manipulate the history of our nation in a sense of, how could I say it, hold on one second. I'm trying to find something here. Here it is. Okay, I got it. Like how the Democrats have been since, and this is like too, I got the history put together. Stick with me on this because you're going to enjoy this. This is going to paint out some facts to show you just how diabolical, evil, disgusting the Democrats are, and how they play their game, and how they use social media, the press, the printing, the newspapers, and how they blatantly write out lie, being that they paint themselves in one picture, while the history we just reviewed, remember the history we're just reviewing, with the Jim Crow laws, the red shirts, the Ku Klux Klan, the terrorization of the lynching of black and white Republicans or what have you, all going on by the Democrats, right? And then I want you to just real quick, I want you to listen to this.
His family was settled in as loving people.
I'm going to try to turn this up so you can hear this. Let's see if I can get this right.
People, and were rowed to the Jersey shore, while cannon boomed and the multitude shouted. 6 horses were needed to drag their coach over the poor roads. His furniture was coming by sea to make a strong central government, which would develop...
So here is where we're at.
While his furniture was coming by sea from New York, Washington had time for a short visit to Mount Vernon. But he and his family were settled in his new home when Congress met the first Monday in December. About this time, 2 political parties began to form in the United States. The Federalists, who were led by Hamilton, wanted to make a strong central government, which would develop the country and be respected abroad. The Democratic Republicans, who were led by Jefferson, wanted the states to hold the cheap power because they were afraid a strong central government might be turned into a monarchy.
Now, did you hear what this guy just said? He said Hamilton. I'm going to play that again.
And so it was used for the Pennsylvania University. While his furniture was coming by sea from New York, Washington had time for a short visit to Mount Vernon. But he and his family were settled in his new home when Congress met the first Monday in December.
Now, I want you to pay attention to what he says about Hamilton, and then he's talking about Thomas Jefferson. And I want you to pay close attention to what he says. Just listen to this.
About this time, two political parties began to form in the United States. The Federalists, who were led by Hamilton, wanted to make a strong central government, which would develop the country and be respected abroad. The Democratic Republicans, who were led by Jefferson, wanted the states to hold the cheap power because they were afraid a strong central government might be turned into a monarchy. Both parties had the good of the country at heart. Jefferson's party is the Democratic Party of the present day, and the Federalists live still in the Republican Party.
Now, did you hear what he just said? He just said Jefferson was the modern-day Democrats, and Hamilton is the modern-day Republicans. This is a blatant, right-out lie. This is a twist of fact. Now, the problem I have with this is that you get these kids go to college, or you get our posterity, our young kids, they download this, they're going to listen to this is what they're going to believe, and this is a lie. This is a blatant out lie. Let me tell you something. Thomas Jefferson was a Republican, and there was no such thing in that time when he's talking about. This is in 1792, what he's speaking of in 1792. And there was no such thing as a Democratic Republican Party in that time. There was only the Republican Party, and the Republican Party was established in 1792 by Thomas Jefferson and James Madison as the Republican Party on that of the founding principles of Americanism that we declared in our Declaration of Independence. Hamilton was a Democrat. Hamilton would have been known as a Democrat in that time, but at that time there was no Democrats. Hamilton was known as a Tory sympathizer. Okay, and let me tell you, the Tory are who formed the Democratic Party in 1828. So let's get that straight. Now, my point is this. If the Tories are the Democrats, Jefferson and Madison and Washington and James Madison all stood against the Tory and the Democrats. They wanted nothing to do with these people because they were the enemies within. Okay? And this becomes very clear, and I'm going to show and I'm going to prove evidence to show fact that Thomas Jefferson was a Republican who stood against that of the Tory and the Whigs of the Democrats, because that's who they became. Now, mind you, in 1792, there was no Democratic Party. The Republican Party was only founded by Thomas Jefferson and James Madison, who both were drafters and signers of the Constitution. And it was upon Jefferson's return, I believe he was in Germany, upon his return from Germany, that he was signing onto the Constitution for the Bill of Rights in 1791. Okay? And this is what I'm saying. So and now they're trying to say that Jefferson was not about the centralized government. He's the guy who founded the Bill of Rights onto the Constitution for the first 10 amendments and signed the Constitution for the federal centralized government. Where the hell did these people get this? And I'm telling you the facts here. Now, we're going to take a look forward on those facts, which I'm thinking, I got to move here. So we're going to take a look at this and see if I can do this. I have these up. If I have it right, here we go. Okay, so we have here this thing called the Democratic Republican Party, which they're saying started 1794 to 1826 is what they're saying. This is a blatant, right-out lie. This is a lie. There was no Democratic Republican Party in 1794. There was no. Matter of fact, the term Democratic Republican Party is only a recent term that was established within probably the last 30 years, being thrown around by the Democrats themselves as a way of trying to materialize this fake political establishment that never really existed. It did not exist. There's not a. I've studied world history. I've studied U.S. history. And I challenged out to many historians, and today, many publications is like this, and I say to them, show me one iota of evidence anywhere from 1790 or even 1777 forward, all the way up into the 1900s, where you ever see anything mentioned of a Democratic Republican Party? Show me. Doesn't exist. Doesn't exist. But they claim it does. There's no such thing. Now, I will say that the Tory and the Tory Democrats, who became the Democrats, I call them the Tory Democrats, they have established many political establishments trying to cause division in this nation. They used similar names of many, like you had the Whig Party, but you also had opposition, like Kentucky had a Whig Party that was more conservative, like Republican, and they were only called the Whig Party, not because they were actual political Whigs, but because they wore the wig. You know, that was it. They wore the wig. The same way where you have many Democrats try to associate Thomas Jefferson, James Madison, because they wore wigs to the Whig Party. But no, the Whig Party on a political foundation is different than that of just being recognized because you wear a wig. Wigs were a thing in the past that was something of like, today, like, wearing a cool jacket or whatever. You could have your hairdo, whatever. It was the thing back then. It was just a trendy fad thing back then. But just because a person wore a wig did not mean they were part of the political Whig Party. Understand that. So you got to understand the difference. But the Democrats like to be able to use this manipulation and saying, oh, well, Thomas Jefferson wore a wig. He was in a Whig Party. And then you get the naive posterity to be like, oh, that's what that means. No, it doesn't. Just because a person wore the wig or wore a wig and that it was just a fashion design doesn't mean they were part of the political establishment known as the Whigs. Okay? Understand that. So let's get that straight. Now, as we move on here, we go up here. This is where I'm going to show you something. This is from, because we're in this era. So we're on this point, and I'm listening to this Washington biography on my headset, and I hear this thing about the idiocy with these people shooting in this Democratic Republican Party. I want to show you something from 1892. This was in a newspaper in 1892. I'll see if I can zoom out so you can see. This is an actual newspaper from the period of 1892. I used to love reading. I mean, today it's amazing these things are online. When I was a kid, you had to go to the library and read these things on a screen with microfilm. And now you could make them bigger and smaller and zoom. This is just incredible. I love it. But we're going to look at this right here. This right here is the creed, their creed. This is what the Democrats, now mind you, we just got done reviewing the history. You have the Democrats imposing the Jim Crow laws, separate but equal laws. They have the Red Jackets terrorizing, lynching white Republicans in the year 1892. Not so much and lynching black Republicans like crazy in 1892 at this time. They got the Ku Klux Klan lynching them. They got the Red Jackets lynching them. They're trying to impose all kinds. They pretty much won the election for the second time for Grover Cleveland, the Democrat, by terrorization going on. They've got their nice labor union terrorizing the industrial complex across the nation. Okay, and now listen to what they claim. Their creed of the Democrats. Full text of the Democratic platform of principles. This is what this article says. I don't know if you can see that. I'll zoom in on this so you can see that. You see that? Their creed, full text of the Democratic platform of principles, right? Now we're going to move down on this and we're going to read this right here. In this, okay, right, I can't see part of it. Convention Wednesday evening presents the following report of the Committee on Resolution. The representatives of the Democratic Party in the United States in convention assembled to reaffirm their allegiance to the principles of the party as formulated, now pay attention here, by Jefferson and exemplified by the long illustration line of his successor in Democratic leadership from Madison. Now this is a joke. This is a joke. And you know what? This kind of propaganda back in that time, what it would do is exactly what it's doing to me. It would infuriate the Republicans. For the Democrats to try and insinuate that Jefferson and Madison were anything of a Democrat would infuriate the Republicans. And that's exactly what they're doing right here. They're infuriating the Republicans with this because that's exactly what it did. I could dig up other articles where you see the arguments and the debates taking place where they're attacked on this for this article. But let's just continue forward because we're going to, first off, when we move forward, we're going to prove that Madison and Jefferson were not Democrats. Okay, but here and then too, they tie them to the father of the Democrats, as you'll see here. leadership of Madison and Cleveland. We believe that the public welfare demands that these principles be applied to the conduct of the federal government through the accession to powers of the party that advocate them, solemnly declaring that the need of the return to these fundamental principles of free popular government based on home rule and individual liberty was never more urgent than now. This is hilarious when you realize this is the same party who has the Red Jackets out terrorizing and lynching blacks right now, trying to disenfranchise them from being able to vote. They have the Ku Klux Klan firing them out of the industrial jobs, forcing them into poverty. You got the Red Jackets or Red Shirts literally killing them and terrorizing them at the voting polls and lynching and hanging not only black Republicans but white Republicans. And they're enacting the Jim Crow laws and the separate but equal laws, is what we've seen with, I believe it was the Presley or Paisley versus Ferguson case, which I mentioned earlier. And that took place in 1892, was pushed by Democrats for separate but equal laws. So at that time, now they're trying to claim, you see, they're doing one thing, which is so self-evident and clear by the history. And yet, here in publication, through propaganda, they're stating they're stating themselves as if they're the Republicans. You see, this is the values they're indicating here are Republican values, not Democratic, because the Democrats at the very time are not doing anything of what they're stating in this article. And this is a fact. This is a fact of what the evidence we just reviewed shows, an unquestionable fact. When you read all the articles and the stories on the Red Jackets or the Red Shirts that I'm talking about, and the issues going on with the Ku Klux Klan, the election of Grover Cleveland, the lynchings of the black Republicans, the burning down of the neighborhoods of the Republican establishments, the terrorization of the Republican business owners, it's just so clear, it's unbelievable. But we're going to finish reading this little article here. Okay, need to return to these fundamental principles of free popular government based on home rule and individual liberty was never more urgent than now, when the tendency to centralize all powers at the federal capital has become a menace to the reserved rights of the states that strikes at the very roots of our government under the Constitution as framed by the fathers of the Republic. We warn the people of our common country, jealous for the preservation of their free institutions, that the policy of federal control of elections to which the Republican Party has committed itself is fraught with the greatest danger, scarcely less momentous than would result from a revolution practically establishing a monarchy on the ruins of the Republic. This is disgraceful, and I'm telling you, this right here, examples, understand, because what we just reviewed, understand this article is running during 1892. And what they're doing is the Democrats are literally doing everything that they're claiming in this article to be wrong. They're doing it. And then they're just running a propaganda, and they do this today. Today, they accuse the Republicans of Confederate flag issues, slavery, when in truth. Now, they do this with the propaganda of the media and the social media and the TV news. They rant and rave about slavery and how wrong it is, and the Confederate flag, how ugly it is, and this, that, and the separate equal, and the Jim Crow laws, and all this stuff. What the majority of the posterity today don't understand is the Democratic Party is the Confederate slave states. They were the Confederacy. They're who formed the Confederacy. They do these things to infuriate the Republican, the true American, because when you see these things like me, it makes me angry, but it's not no more, because you know what? I see the game. And I've known this game for a long time with them. I'm not going to get angry over it, but what really it is what I need to do and what I'm trying to do is make people aware, see this truth, see these facts, and understand them. Now let's go forward here. You see here, you got the Hamilton and Madison, the partnership that never was. 1783, 1789. Now they're trying to associate Madison and Hamilton and Jefferson as a Democrat. This is ridiculous. And this article here will cover that pretty clear. There's a link to that going to be in the description below. We have the Republican Party. This is the other thing they try to say. They try to say the Republican Party was founded in 1854. I don't know if you can see that right here. This is what they try to say. Let's see if I could zoom in here. If you can see it right there. If I make it bigger. Just trying to make it where everybody can see this clear. Right, and what it says here, one such meeting in Wisconsin on March 20th, 1850 is generally remembered as the founding meeting of the Republican Party. Now, this is a lie. Understand, too, this was, what happened was, what you had happen in Wisconsin was you had what was known as a popular sovereignty. The Whigs designated. They were designated Whigs, but they were, understand now too, if you take the time to look into the Wisconsin establishment, they were looking to abolish slavery, so you know they weren't true Whigs, because the Whigs were in support of slavery. They were part of the Democratic platform, was the true Whigs. The Whig political was for slavery. The Democratic Party is the Confederate slave states. Okay, in 1854, the Democratic Party was the majority of slaveholders there who formed the Confederate slave states. Those of the Whig Party was of Great Britain, who was alliance with that of the Democratic Party. They were all in favor of slavery. So these Whigs here were known as Whigs because they just wore a wig. Okay, they were guys who would go, and when they would have assembly or a meeting, they put their fake wigs on. Okay, and that's why it says right here, territories by popular sovereignty, the Whigs disintegrated. Okay, disintegrated, they say here. 1854, anti-slavery Whigs had begun meeting in the upper western states to discuss the formation of a new party. One such meeting as Wisconsin on March 1854 is generally remembered as the founding meeting of the Republican Party. But understand, this is not the founding of the Republican Party as a whole, because the Republican Party, as we move forward, we can see here, okay, and real quick though, here while I got this up, Hamilton warned against political intolerance. Right here, it talks about this by here. Although he fought the British during the Revolution, after the war, he defended the rights of the Tories against loyalty test and property confiscation. So understand, and that's what I say. Like when we look at at the time of Abraham Lincoln. Okay, because this is before the time of Abraham, this is before the Civil War, but we've gone over it. That we had Andrew Johnson. Andrew Johnson is known as the father of rhinos, but in truth, Hamilton would be what you would call a rhino. But at the time there was no Democratic Party yet established. When we're talking about in 1792, there's only the establishment then of a first political party of the Republican Party by Thomas Jefferson and James Madison. And he was in support of the Tories. He was kind of like a guy who was playing a political role, kind of like what the Democrats do right now. They take a position with our Congress, our House of Representatives, and in our government as if they're part of America, when in truth, they're only in that position in this country to push that of foreign interest and to be a platform for that of foreign interest and to attempt to overthrow and indoctrinate that of the American posterity with that of the interest of foreign interest of totalitarian world regimes. This is what they've been doing now for the last 160 years since the Civil War. They couldn't win the Civil War. They couldn't beat the Americans then. So they're methodically and slowly infiltrating and growing within our own nation as the enemies within and slowly taking over our government from within. This is what they've been doing. But here is the proof to show Hamilton supported the Tories, okay? So now as we progress, now I want you to understand, Hamilton right here is in support of the Tories, okay? Hamilton, too, as well, I want to show here. This is Aaron Barr. This was Thomas Jefferson's vice president. Or, no, it was, Aaron Barr was a vice president with Thomas Jefferson. And what he did was, this is the guy who killed Hamilton. He shot Hamilton and killed him in a duel. Okay, and this is another thing I want to put out right here. This is on with Hamilton right here. By early 1790s, newspapers started calling Hamilton supporters Federalists. Okay, see now, and their opponents Democrats, Republicans Jeffersonians. Now, Republicans Jeffersonians are true. Federalists and Democrats were true toward Hamilton, not Jefferson and Madison. Jefferson and Madison were known as Republicans. Now, we understand we have all these different things being thrown around here. And it says here, Jeffersons are much later Democratic Republicans. Now, much later is all the way into the 1900s, because back in that time, there was no such thing as Democratic Republicans. There was no party of Democratic Republicans of a unified, because there can't be. A Democratic Party establishment is of a democracy of majority rule. A Republican Party or a Republican form of government is that of a constitutional government of individualism of every individual being protected by the same laws of the Constitution. So you can't have a democratic republic. That's an oxymoron. It's just not possible. It's not even. I don't know if that's proper to say, but it's just not possible. It's just not possible to have a democratic republic. It's just not possible. But now, with that said, too, we're going to go back here. We're going to look. This is the campaign ad for Jefferson and Clinton running in the year of 1804. Which I believe is, this is Thomas Jefferson's 1804 political campaign poster. Now I want to read this. Turn out, save your country from ruin. From an emperor, from a king, from an iron grasp of British Tory factions. So understand, Thomas Jefferson is trying to tell, like, you see, he's trying to link Jefferson and Madison to that of monarchies and kings and the Tory, and say that Hamilton was not of that. Hamilton was more Republican. This is a lie. It's pretty clear that the Republicans, what you see, big Republicans right there, right? Republicans, turn out and save your country from ruin. From an emperor, from a king, from an iron grasp of a British Tory fascist. An unprincipled bandito of British speculators. The hirelings, tools, and mercenaries of His Majesty King George III have thronged our city and diffused the position of principles among us. So pretty much, Jefferson is making it clear that through the Tories, the King of Great Britain is still infringing upon that of the American people, our pursuit of happiness, our pursuit of establishing our nation as we want under American founding principles, by the Tories, right? The enemies within. Down with the Tories, down with the British fascists. Hamilton was in favor and support and a defender of the Tories and a sympathizer with that of the British fascists. He was one. He would have been, if you would have had the Democratic Party at that time, which you didn't, but some did refer to it because a democratic democracy is what makes up the world's totalitarian regimes. America was a new founded republic, form of government that never existed before. But as you can see here, down with the Tories, down with the British fascists. Before they have it in their power to enslave you and reduce your families to distress by heavy taxation, Republicans want no tribute liars. They want no ship ocean liars. They want no refuge kings for lords. They want no Varick to the Lord it over them. They want no Jones for senator. Who fought with the British against the Americans in time of the war? The Tories did. That's what he's trying to warn people. But they want in their place such men as Jefferson and Clinton. That's who we want. Real Americans is what it's saying. Republicans. So understand, 1804, and that's when this is right here, is 1804. Let's see if I can find this here, how I got this. We can close it out right here. Let's see if it is. Right here, Jefferson's campaign, 1804. Republican campaign poster from 1804, encouraging the election of President Thomas Jefferson and Vice President George Clinton. So as you can see, this is from 1804, and it's pretty big, Republicans. You see, he makes it pretty clear who he is. And this was Aaron Barr, was the guy who killed Hamilton in a duel, just so you're aware. But like I say, the whole point of this was to bring about how, when you look at this and you realize from this newspaper clipping right here of so-called the creed, the full text of the Democratic platform of principles right here of the Democratic Party. This is disgraceful. This is disgraceful. Totally disgraceful that the Democrats, how they do this and how it's so clear in history they do this and how they're still this very day doing the very same thing. And I just wanted to say, and then like I say, to me, the authors of this right here.
Democratic Republicans who were led by Jefferson wanted the Stington had time for a short visit to Mount Vernon, but the country and be respected abroad. The Democratic Republicans who were led by Jefferson wanted the states to hold the cheap power because they were afraid a strong central government might be turned into a monarchy. Both parties had the good of the country at heart.
Now mind you, in the original of this biography of George Washington, I've read the original book, and I know it didn't say that. It did not say that. These are ad-lib put into verbal, right now audible books where the Democrats and those on board with this propaganda of deceiving the American posterity with these lies, right out blatant lies of trying to make America to, they're always mentioning Democratic, like Democratic Republican is a modern term that was made up recently, never existed during the time of Jefferson, Madison, or Hamilton. This is a lie. There was no such thing as a Democratic Republican Party back during that time. This is only a modern day term that's being used to reference back in that time about a thing that, then did not even exist. But they're doing it to try and make it appear that Democrats existed in that time, that Democrats somehow had some kind of role, and they did have a role. In the founding of America, they had a role as to what they are still to this day. The enemies within. They were the Tory. They were the enemies within. They were loyal to Great Britain and the world's totalitarian regimes, as the same as they still are to this day, which was self-evident by 1861, where the Democrats formed the Confederate slave states, established their own constitution, formed their own army, and attempted to overthrow the constitutional free republic of the United States of America, which they lost that war. But since losing that war since 1865, they have still pursued forward on the pursuit to infiltrate and try to overthrow this nation from within. And right now, with the propaganda, what we see going on, with the social media blocking of freedom of speech, the news right now being, complicit with all this propaganda and these lies. And now so many things like Wikipedia. Wikipedia has so much lies about our American history that's being confounded and put out there by people who are Democrats doing this very same thing. And then people like me, who I was, from 1995, I used to be a member, able to edit and make statements about history on Wikipedia for years, decades. And now I'm recently been removed from Wikipedia, no longer allowed by a Democrat, because I challenged him on the foundation of that he is lying about the Democratic Republican Party, because he has a website he made about the Democratic Republican Party, trying to say it was the first true founding, and I called the guy a liar. I called him out on it. I put political facts up front on it, and obviously he has some kind of clout with them, because they just literally shut my account down, so there's nothing I can do about that now. But I do know there's other people with Wikipedia right now that are challenging that same person and making progress on it, because they have some clout themselves, so we'll see where that goes. But now, as I see here, they have taken this propaganda of their Democratic Party lies and twisting and confounding the U.S. and United States history, and in trying to incorporate themselves as being some kind of a part of America when they're not. They're the enemies within. They've always been the enemies within. There still are the enemies within. Now they're going into audible books and incorporating these tactics of their propaganda, which you can see right here from 1892. They've been doing this for a long time. They're still doing the very same thing. And they're succeeding, because they're confounding. Like right now, they have the majority of black communities of people who have very poor education systems. They're easily manipulated and fooled by this kind of propaganda. They see this stuff on the news. When you have a society of people within collective democratic controlled districts, and where the education system is failing and the majority of people are illiterate, the only thing they have to count on is that what they hear off the TV. And as we know on the news right now, with those who are all left-leaning Democratic supportive media of the news and the social media and what have you, are all presenting themselves as that this is the truth, what the Democrats say, and they're spewing lies out daily. And this is what these people are hearing and listening to. And when I talk to these people who I know are uneducated, unaware, they get very angry because they believe the news. They believe what they're being told, and they get angry about it. And they want to defend what they believe is the truth, but it's not the truth. It's like Joe Biden said, they choose truth over facts. Their truth is actually lies, and if the people were educated and able to read and literate to be able to study and research the facts, they would see by the facts that they're being lied to. But the Democrats capitalize on this, and they've always capitalized on this. They've been doing this for a very, very long time. And this is just my point, is that we have to face that truth of fact, that this is what the Democrats have been doing, and they have been doing for a very, very long time. And so, like I said, I'll include links to everything here in the description thing below. You guys can do your own due diligence on the research of it. But that made me very upset listening to that audio book and hearing that these scumbag, no good, elitist, scumbag Democrats are now inputting these propaganda lies in the audio books, changing that of historical books on biographies of our founding fathers. Just disgraceful. These people have no it's clear too, even by the article I just showed you in the newspaper, it's pretty clear these people have no basement of level that they will go to where they go, oh, that's just too much. Obviously, there's no humanity in these people whatsoever. There's no integrity within these people whatsoever. They're just disgraceful, inhumane, worthless, no good scumbags of the earth. They are the most worthless scumbags of humanity on the earth, and the cause of every issue we're facing in this nation right now. But with that, we'll pick up on the next one in history heading into the 1900s, and we're going to get to see, even as we move forward, Because we're coming into an area where they really expose their inhumanity of the Democratic Party and these people's real true values when we get into Woodrow Wilson. But until then, I'll see you guys next time. Thank you for watching my video this far. And everybody have a great week and a great weekend. And I'll see you on the next video. Thanks again to all who have taken the time to watch my video. I'll see you next time. That ends it.